The gala was supposed to be business, but Julian Thorne made it personal. After defending Nia from the slimy Marcus Sterling with a lethality that blurred the lines of boss, Julian's control finally snapped. On the moonlit terrace of the Met, he confessed his obsession. Clause 14 was never about work. It was about ensuring she never left his reach again. The night ended with a scorching kiss and a command. We're going to the penthouse. Now, Nia is about to find out exactly what total accessibility means when the office doors are locked and the city lights are the only witnesses. Hello, lovelies. Sorry for the delay in updating this last part of the story. I have been down for the past few days and I had to take some days off. Big thanks to those of you who reached. Now, let's move on with the story. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was a blur of steel and silence, but the air felt like it was humming with high-voltage electricity. Julian hadn't let go of my hand since we left the gala. His grip was firm, not painful, but possessive, as if he expected me to bolt the moment the doors opened. I didn't want to bolt. My heart was a drum in my ears, and my skin was still tingling where he had touched me. The doors slid open with a soft ding. The penthouse was dark, the massive floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. The city looked like a carpet of diamonds, but all I could look at was the man beside me. Julian stepped into the foyer, pulling me with him. He didn't turn on the lights. He didn't need to. He shed his tuxedo jacket, tossing it onto a chair without looking, and then he turned to me. "You're quiet," he said. His voice was lower now, rougher. "I'm thinking," I whispered, my voice caught in my throat. "About what?" He moved closer, the scent of sandalwood and something primal wrapping around me. "About Clause 14. About what happens now." Julian reached out, his fingers tracing the high neckline of my red silk dress. "Clause 14 gives me your time, Nia. It gives me your presence. But tonight..." He stepped into my space, his chest brushing against mine. "Tonight, I want the parts of you that aren't in the contract." He spun me around slowly. I felt the cool air of the room hit my bare back again, and then I felt his warmth. His fingers found the small hook at the top of my dress. "Julian," I breathed, a warning and a plea all at once. "I told you," he murmured against the shell of my ear, his breath sending a fresh wave of shivers down my spine. "You are an investment, Nia, and I always collect on my debts." He didn't unzip the dress. Not yet. Instead, he rested his forehead against the back of my neck, his hands resting on my hips. I could feel him trembling, just a fraction. The powerful, untouchable Julian Thorne was shaken. "I've spent every hour since that night at the hotel trying to convince myself you were just a mistake," he confessed into my skin. "A lapse in judgment. But then you walked into my boardroom, and I realized I didn't want to forget. I wanted to own the memory." I turned in his arms, facing him. The moonlight caught the silver in his dreadlocks and the raw honesty in his eyes. "I'm not something you can own, Julian," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I'm your employee. I'm a person." "I know," he rasped. He reached up, cupping my face with both hands. "That's the problem. If you were just an object, I could satisfy the hunger and move on. But it's you. It's your fire. It's the way you look at me like you're not afraid to lose your job." He leaned down, his lips ghosting over mine. "Are you afraid, Nia?" "Of you?" I asked. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him down. "No. I'm afraid of how much I don't want to leave." The kiss that followed was slow, deep, and tasted like a surrender. He picked me up effortlessly, my heels dangling as he carried me toward the master suite. But as he set me down on the edge of the silk-covered bed, his phone on the nightstand began to glow. It wasn't a text. It was a high-priority alert from the Thorne Enterprises security feed. Julian glanced at it, his jaw tightening. He moved to silence it, but his eyes froze on the screen. He grabbed the phone, his expression shifting from passion to a cold, predatory focus. "What is it?" I asked, sitting up and pulling the silk of my dress tight. Julian didn't answer for a long moment. He tapped the screen, zooming in on a grainy image of the Thorne Enterprises lobby from 10 minutes ago. A man was standing there, talking to the night security guard. He was holding an envelope with Nia's name on it. The man was Marcus Sterling, and he wasn't looking for a merger. "He's not just a jerk, Nia," Julian said, his voice turning to ice. "He's a desperate man, and it looks like he's decided that if he can't have my stock, he'll take my acquisitions." Julian turned to me, his eyes dark with a new kind of fire. "Stay here. Lock the door. Do not come out until I tell you." "Julian, wait." But he was already moving, grabbing a fresh shirt and his phone. The lover was gone. The CEO was back, and this time, he was a general going to war. The air in the penthouse froze. The transition was so abrupt it felt like physical whiplash. One moment, I was flushed against the heat of Julian's body. The next, I was watching the ruthless CEO settle over his features like a suit of armor. He didn't just walk to the door, he stalked. He grabbed his discarded tuxedo jacket and threw it on, the silk lining snapping like a whip. "Julian, you can't leave me here like this," I said, sliding off the bed. The crimson silk of my dress pulled around my ankles, making me feel exposed and powerful all at once. If Marcus is at the office with my name on an envelope, this involves me. Julian stopped at the door, his hand on the handle. He turned, and for a second, the mask slipped. His eyes traveled over me, from my messy bun to the bare skin of my shoulders. The hunger was still there, but it was being suppressed by a cold, protective rage. "Marcus Sterling is a bottom feeder," Julian rasped. "He thinks he can use you to get to me. He thinks you're a leverage point." "Am I?" I challenged, stepping into the light of the skyline. Julian's gaze darkened. "You are the only thing in this city I can't calculate the risk for, Nia. That makes you a liability. And I don't lose liabilities. I secure them. I'm coming with you." "No. Clause 14, Julian." I reminded him, my voice steady. "Total accessibility. You told me I don't leave your side. If you're going to the office to end this, I'm the one who started it by walking into that boardroom. I'm finishing it." A tense silence stretched between us. I could see the battle in his mind, the instinct to lock me away where I was safe versus the dark thrill of having me stand beside him. "Fine," he snapped, though a ghost of a smirk touched his lips. "But you stay behind me. If he so much as breathes in your direction, I'm not just buying his company. I'm burying it." The ride back to Thorne Enterprises was different. There was no leather seat ocean between us this time. Julian had his arm draped behind my head, his fingers tangled in the stray hairs at the nape of my neck. He didn't speak, but the pressure of his touch told me everything. He was marking his territory. When we arrived, the lobby was silent, save for the hum of the elevators and the nervous shuffling of the night security guard. Marcus Sterling was sitting on a designer leather bench, looking smugly at a thick manila envelope. He stood up when we entered, his eyes immediately darting to me. His gaze lingered on the red dress, and I felt Julian's hand tighten on my waist, pulling me flush against his side. "Julian," Marcus drawled, his voice echoing in the empty lobby. "And the lovely Nia. I figured you wouldn't be able to resist a late-night summons. It's a habit of yours, isn't it?" "You have 30 seconds to tell me why you're harassing my staff, Marcus," Julian said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. "Before I have security toss you into the gutter where you belong." Marcus laughed, held up the envelope. "Harassing? No. I'm helping. I did a little digging into our mystery girl. It's amazing what you find when you look past a pretty face and a Harvard-level resume." He stepped closer, ignoring the way Julian's body went rigid. "Nia Vane. Top of her class. Brilliant. But she has a bit of a debt problem, doesn't she? A family estate in arrears, a sister's medical bills piling up. And then there's the matter of her last employer. She left quite suddenly after a misunderstanding involving a missing high-value account." I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't that I had stolen anything. It was that I had been framed by a senior partner who didn't like a woman of color climbing the ladder faster than him. I had left to save my career, but on paper, it looked like a flight from guilt. "I have the proof right here," Marcus said, tapping the envelope. "The kind of proof that the board of directors would love to see. The kind of proof that makes Clause 14 look like a payoff for silence rather than a contract." He looked at me, a predatory glint in his eyes. "But maybe we can make a deal, Nia. You give me the login credentials for the Thorne Aegis merger, and this envelope disappears. You get to keep your job, and Julian gets to keep his plaything." The word plaything was the final straw. Julian moved. It wasn't a corporate move. It was a blur of raw, unadulterated power. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his hand shooting out to grab Marcus by the throat, pinning him against the marble pillar of the lobby. The envelope dropped to the floor. "Julian." I gasped, but I didn't move to stop him. "You listen to me, you pathetic coward," Julian hissed, his face inches from Marcus's. Marcus was gasping, his face turning a mottled purple. "I knew about her past the day I hired her. I didn't hire her despite it, I hired her because she fought through it. I have the original files from her previous firm. I bought that firm last week, Marcus. I own the man who framed her. I have his signed confession in my safe right now. Marcus's eyes bugged out. You, what? I don't leave my flanks exposed, Julian growled. And I certainly don't leave my woman unprotected. You thought you found a weakness. You found the only thing in this world that makes me truly dangerous. Julian leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. The merger is done. Your shares are being shorted as we speak. By the time the markets open tomorrow, the name Sterling will be a footnote in a bankruptcy filing. Now, get out of my sight before I decide that a restraining order isn't enough. Julian released him. Marcus collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, before scrambling toward the revolving doors, leaving the envelope behind. The silence that followed was heavy. The security guard had conveniently disappeared into the back room. It was just me, Julian, and the manila envelope on the floor. I looked at Julian. He was breathing hard, his tuxedo shirt slightly rumpled, his dreadlocks falling over his face. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man who had just fought a war. You bought the firm. I whispered. You knew. Julian turned to me. The rage was gone, replaced by a vulnerability that made my heart ache. I told you, Nia. From the moment you left that hotel, I couldn't breathe until I knew everything. I wanted to make sure no one could ever hurt you again. Not even me. I walked toward him, stepping over the envelope. I reached up and straightened his collar, my fingers lingering on the warmth of his neck. You did all that for an employee. Don't lie to yourself, Nia, he murmured, his hands finding my waist and pulling me into the circle of his arms. We stopped being boss and employee the moment I saw you in that boardroom. We were just two people who found the only other person in the world who could match them. He looked down at me, his eyes searching mine. The contract is over, Nia. Clause 14. I'm striking it. You're free. You can walk out those doors right now, and I'll ensure your career is golden for the rest of your life. My heart stuttered. You're letting me go. I'm giving you the choice, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I don't want to own you. I want you to choose to be here. I looked at the doors, then back at the man who had built an empire but was currently trembling at the thought of me leaving. I thought about the one-night stand, the boardroom, the red dress, and the way he had just defended my honor without hesitation. I think I'd like to negotiate a new contract, I whispered. Julian's brow arched. Oh, and what are the terms? I leaned up, my lips brushing against his. Total accessibility. But this time, it goes both ways. No secrets. No corporate walls. Just us. Julian didn't wait. He crashed his lips onto mine, a kiss that tasted of victory, relief, and a promise that would last far longer than any legal document. He swept me up into his arms, but we didn't go to the elevators. The office. I teased against his neck. Julian stopped in the middle of the empty, dimly lit lobby. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes, his chest heaving. A slow, wicked grin spread across his face. The kind of look that told me exactly why he was the most feared man in Manhattan. The office, he confirmed, his voice dropping to a gravelly low. I've spent 12 hours a day for weeks watching you sit at that desk, Nia. Watching you cross your legs, watching you chew on the end of your pen when you're thinking, watching you button that blue blouse all the way to the top. Do you have any idea what that did to me? He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and carried me toward the private executive express elevator. He didn't set me down. He held me like I was the most precious prize he had ever won, his fingers digging slightly into the silk of my dress. When the elevator doors slid shut, the small space felt like an oven. Julian pressed the button for the 40th floor, but he didn't turn around. He pushed me gently against the mirrored wall of the lift. The cool glass hit my bare back, a sharp contrast to the heat of his body. Julian, I whispered, my breath hitching as he leaned in. You've been a very distracting assistant, Ms. Vane, he murmured, his lips grazing my jawline. He reached up, his thumb tracing the curve of my bottom lip. I had a perfectly organized life before you snuck out of that hotel room. Now, I can't even look at a spreadsheet without seeing your face. He kissed the corner of my mouth, then the other. It was slow, agonizing torture. He was teasing me, testing my resolve. Is that so? I managed to say, my hands finding the lapels of his tuxedo. I tugged him closer, my heart hammering against his chest. I thought you liked being in control. I do, he breathed, his hand sliding down to the small of my back, pulling me flush against him. But I think I like being controlled by you even more. The elevator dinged. The doors opened to the silent, moonlit executive floor. Julian finally let me stand on my own feet, but he kept his hand firmly locked with mine. He led me through the darkness, past the empty cubicles and the silent copy machines, straight to the heavy mahogany doors of his office. He pushed them open and flipped a switch. The room didn't flood with bright light. Instead, the soft amber floor lamps hummed to life, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. Julian walked to his massive desk, the one that cost more than my first car. He cleared a stack of folders with one sweep of his arm, the papers fluttering to the floor like autumn leaves. "Mr. Thorne," I teased, leaning against the door frame. That was the merger file. Very unprofessional. Julian untied his silk bow tie and let it fall to the carpet. He began unbuttoning his white shirt, his eyes never leaving mine. "The merger is finished, Nia. Marcus is gone. The only business left tonight is us." He stepped toward me, his shirt open to reveal the hard, dark planes of his chest. He looked powerful, untamed, and completely mine. He reached out, his fingers catching the high neck of my red dress. "This dress," he rasped. "I've been dreaming about taking it off you since the moment you walked into my office this afternoon. You told me it was for the gala," I reminded him, my voice trembling as he stepped into my personal space. "It was for me," he corrected. "Everything tonight was for me. I wanted everyone to see you, to want you, and then I wanted to be the only one who got to take you home." He turned me around, his warm breath hitting my neck. I felt the light slide of the zipper as he slowly, inch by inch, lowered it. The silk gave way, the dress loosening around my body. Julian didn't rush. He kissed the skin he revealed, the nape of my neck, the ridge of my spine, the slope of my shoulder. I leaned back into him, closing my eyes. The feeling of his rough hands against my skin made my brain go fuzzy. "You're shaking again," he whispered against my skin. "You know why," I replied, turning in his arms. The dress was hanging precariously off my hips now, held up only by the way he was holding me. Julian picked me up and sat me on the edge of the mahogany desk. The wood was cool against my thighs. He stepped between my knees, his hands resting on the desk on either side of me, trapping me just like he had on the balcony. But this time, there was no anger. Only fire. "Clause 14, he murmured, his face inches from mine. "Total accessibility. Do you remember what I said it meant?" "You said you owned my time," I whispered, reaching out to trace the tattoos on his forearm. "I lied," Julian confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't want your time. I wanted your heart. I wanted the way you laugh when you think I'm not looking. I wanted the way you challenge me when everyone else just says yes. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. "I've spent my whole life building walls, Nia. I built a billion-dollar company just so no one could ever get close enough to see who I really was. And then you walked in with those braids and that fire in your eyes, and you burned the whole thing down in one night." I reached up, my fingers tangling in his dreadlocks. I pulled him down into a kiss that wasn't about power or contracts. It was soft, sweet, and desperate. It was a thank you and a promise. Julian groaned into the kiss, his hands moving from the desk to my waist. He pulled me closer, his touch electric. He tasted like the champagne we'd shared and the whiskey he'd had at the bar, but mostly, he tasted like home. "Stay with me," he whispered against my lips. "Not because of the job. Not because of the money. Stay because you're the only person who makes this world feel real." "I'm not going anywhere, Julian," I promised, my voice cracking. "I think I've been yours since that hotel room. I just didn't want to admit it." He smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He picked me up again, but this time, he headed for the private lounge at the back of the office, the one with the plush velvet sofa and the view of the stars. "In that case," he said, his eyes dark with a playful, romantic heat, "I think we should start working on a new agreement. One that involves a lot less paperwork and a lot more personal time." I laughed, wrapping my arms around his neck as he carried me into the shadows. "Does this mean I'm fired?" Julian stopped at the door of the lounge, looking down at me with an intensity that made my heart stop. "No, Nia. It means you're promoted. To the only position that matters." "And what's that?" "Mine." As he carried me into the room and the door clicked shut behind us, the lights of New York City glittered outside the window, but they couldn't compare to the light in Julian's eyes. The contract was gone, the rivalry was over, And for the first time in my life, I wasn't running away. I was exactly where I was meant to be. 1 year later, the sun was setting over the Mediterranean, casting a golden glow over the deck of the Thorne Legacy. I sat in a lounge chair, a glass of vintage champagne in my hand. My laptop was open, but I wasn't looking at spreadsheets. I was looking at the man diving into the turquoise water below. Julian surfaced, his hair slicked back, his muscles glistening in the sun. He climbed the ladder and walked toward me, dripping water onto the deck. "You're working," he accused, a playful glint in his eyes. "I'm reviewing the quarterly reports," I argued, though I was actually looking at photos of our new house. Julian leaned over, closing my laptop with one hand and pulling me up with the other. He wrapped a towel around his waist, but kept me close. "The reports can wait," he whispered. "I have a question for you." He didn't drop to a knee. He just held my gaze, the intensity of it enough to make me breathless. He pulled a small, velvet box from his pocket. "Nia Vane," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've spent my whole life acquiring things. But you're the only thing I've ever earned. Marry me. Not because of a clause, but because I'm a mess without you." I felt tears prickling my eyes. I looked at the man who had gone from a stranger in a hotel room to my everything. "On one condition," I said, a smile breaking across my face. Julian laughed. "Always a negotiator. What is it?" "I get to keep the red dress." Julian pulled me in for a kiss that tasted of salt and forever. "Nia, you can have the whole world. As long as I'm the one who gets to watch you rule it." And that is the final chapter of Nia and Julian's story. From the first night to the final proposal, they've proven that some contracts are meant to be broken, and some promises are meant to last a lifetime. Thank you guys for sticking till the end. Please, do not forget to like, share and comment on this video. Also subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so.